Good afternoon. Good afternoon. If you need to get your drink, please get it so that we can start. It's 17:30 on the dot. Welcome. My name is Luandle Mqadi. I'm a specialist at the IDC focusing on sustainability, impact, and what we refer to as ESRG. Everyone calls it ESG, but we call it SRG in the Chief Operations Office. Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. Is it afternoon or evening? Early evening. Get stopped too quickly here, so I'll just say early evening for all of us. But just to welcome you all and thanks for honoring our invite. I think a lot more people will be joining us, but we're not going to wait for them because we want to keep time. And I think they're going to find their spots when they get here. Some housekeeping. If you go out of this room on your right-hand side, that's where you would find bathrooms. If you need something to drink, it's that side. And if you want to nibble on something, it's that side. We're going to have a very interesting chat this afternoon. Those who don't know what the Industrial Development Corporation is, the Industrial Development Corporation was established in 1940 through an act of parliament. We are self-funded. We are owned by the South African government. Our mandate is to actually drive sustainable industrial development, and that is going to be the topic of today. We're going to share with you how we do that. But before we get into the business of things today, I'm not alone. I'm sure you've met all of my colleagues. Our delegation as the IDC is being led by our Chief Operations Officer. I'm sure you all know Joanne sitting in front of me. We have our Acting Divisional Executive, Rian Kutsier. He's sitting there. We've got our industry planning team, Mahendra, who is leading all the work that we are doing in the green hydrogen space. We've got Nathan Fredericks is sitting there in the back. Everything that has to do with NEVs, he's your person. And we've got Pamela Mondliwa, who will be taking us through the key conversation, the reason why we're here today. Pamela Mondliwa, she's one of our industry planners, she's sitting there. And of course, we've got Denise, who you've been communicating with, she's sitting outside. So that's the team from the IDC who's here. So if you need to engage any of us, we're here. And without further ado, I'd like you to watch a video that we've prepared for you on some of the work that we are doing within the space of sustainable industrial development. Of course, you'll hear more about it later on, but I'd like you to watch this video. Thank you. Can you play the video, please? that's just a snippet of what we do from a sustainable industrial development. Thank you. Oh, thanks. It's just a snippet of what we do. We do more than that, of course, and my colleagues are going to tell you more about that. But I'd like to call upon Pamela, who will be doing a presentation on the sustainable industrial development that we do, and you've just seen some snippets, case studies of the work that we're doing on the ground. Pamela, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Landle, and good afternoon to everyone. I have the pleasure of taking you through the IDC's approach to sustainable industrialization, and this is really the IDC's climate change response document, because we want to share with you how we are thinking about it so that we can find like-minded people, because we know that the agenda is ambitious and we would want partners along the way. So my presentation is really organized in 4 parts. I'm going to first take you through a little bit through this South African economic context, and I think this matters because your climate change response has to speak to where you are as the country in that moment. Then we're going to give you the highlights package of our sustainable industrialization approach. Following that, we're going to talk about how we are positioning ourselves as the IDC to execute on this strategy. And then lastly, we are going to tell you about the progress that we've made so far, as well as the future priorities. And this is important because this is the first time we are presenting the strategy to external stakeholders, this is an agenda that we have been driving within the organization for some time now. So to talk a little bit about where South Africa is and the importance of then designing or developing a climate change response strategy that considers both where we are as a country as well as the various climate dynamics and where we would like to go. So I think some of you in the room may be aware the country is going through a period of low growth. We are also experiencing a premature deindustrialization. We also have an industrial economic structure that is geared towards capital-intensive and also minerals-related products. And what this does is that it makes the economy vulnerable to the commodity cycles where the economy grows very well during high prices, but when the commodity prices are down, the economy struggles to some extent. And we also have socioeconomic challenges linked to poverty, inequality, and high levels of unemployment. So from that perspective, as a country, we then also need to engage with the global climate change dynamics. South Africa has committed to achieve net zero by 2050. And this will have to, in part, come from industry, given that the sectoral emissions account for 26% of South Africa's total emissions. The country is also experiencing, or will, to some extent, experience various transition risks, one in part from the regulations that various countries are putting into place. I think everyone is familiar with the carbon border a tax adjustment mechanism, which does mean that for countries like South Africa that are exposed to the European markets, this poses some sort of risks to the economy if we do not transition in time. There's as well various other changes such as technological disruptions, but also I think something that speaks really as an effect of climate change. The changes in climate are expected to proceed twice as fast in the African continent than in the rest of the world. And what this does is really pose a big challenge to our agricultural production as well as to some degree infrastructure. So in the way that we craft our climate response strategy, we consider how we can support the resilience of the economy, both economically but also climate resilience, but also how do we respond to the transition risks, but also taking into account the opportunities that are created by these transition risks. So this brings us really then to the IDC's approach to sustainable industrialization. And how we framed it is the IDC is supporting the maintenance and expansion of industrial capacity in a manner that is socially inclusive and environmentally responsible. And we framed it this way because we acknowledge that industrialization is still a key driver of economic prosperity. And so we want to be able to leverage those dynamic aspects of industrialization going forward as well. But we also know that you've seen the socioeconomic challenges that we have. If we are not addressing that in our path, it does undermine the sustainability of the approach that we take. And of course, there are all the climate matters that we need to consider. So we've brought this down to 4 key objectives of our approach. The first being our response goes beyond mitigating harm. Really, we're focusing on creating new long-run inclusive growth and employment through the low-carbon transitions. Secondly, we would like to leverage South Africa's abundant renewable energy resources taken together with the SADC region's endowments in critical minerals to support international competitiveness. And if you look at South Africa's initial path to industrialization, in part that was driven by access to low-cost abundant coal. So we're using that model, but greening the model to some to a degree. So how do we leverage our other resources with solar and wind to be able to drive international competitiveness in the same way? Then third, we're going to support collective transformation of ecosystem development to maximize shared benefits. And here what we're really thinking about is the supply chains that were linked to the coal industries and other industries are different to those that are rising in some of the green new industries. So if we want to drive sustained growth, we need to be able to embed elements of these new supply chains into our economy. So I'll take you a little bit later in the presentation about how it is that we go about ecosystem development. And then last, we are supporting climate resilience of sectors that are vulnerable to physical risks of climate change. And this is including through the development of regional value chains, which I'll touch on a little bit later. So we have this house diagram that we have. We've got our 4 pathways that we've identified. The first one is we are catalyzing low carbon and green growth. In this pillar, we're really looking at how to establish the new ecosystems in industries such as green hydrogen, new electric vehicles, and we've already had some success in terms of catalyzing investment in renewable energy in the country, but very much linking it to how do we leverage that to upgrade within global value chains. The second pillar is focusing on diversification and jobs-rich industrialization. And this is important because I mentioned earlier that our economy is still geared towards mining and minerals-related industries. So how do we diversify our economy to other sectors so that we are not as vulnerable as the economy? Then it's the third pillar is supporting resilience to physical climate change risks. I've mentioned this a bit as well. And then the last pillar is really around supporting the development of regional value chains. This matters for a number of reasons, and I'm going to take you through it a little bit later on. But the region is very important, a demand for South Africa, and that's just one of the benefits. But also in terms of the climate effects that we're seeing, there are differing weather patterns that we can leverage to be able to ensure food security, but also sustainable businesses within the agricultural value chains. And these pillars will be supported by our ecosystem approach, where we seek to optimize competitiveness and linkages, also in a way that supports inclusion, as well as also looking at sustainable infrastructure and energy as enablers of industrialization. So when we say and we talk about ecosystem development, how is it that the IDC goes about this? So we're not just a bank in terms of funding, but we look at how to develop and support businesses really throughout the various cycles. So we have various units within the IDC that focus on ecosystem development. We are involved in project development, in business development, walking the path with businesses from pre-feasibility stage all the way to bankability and implementation. We also have specific program and fund development in order to respond to particular financing gaps that we've identified. We then invest in various ways from our balance sheet, but we also syndicate for other players. And really, we focus on creating value for our clients and partners in various ways. So now what I'm going to do is take you through each of the pillars by giving you an example of what we're doing. Please note that this is just one example, not the only thing that we're doing in each of those areas, and highlight a few of our priorities. In terms of the first pillar, which is catalyzing low carbon growth and green growth, we are focused at taking an integrated approach to this. And this is because if we are to optimize the developmental impact for this, we need to be able to link interventions within the energy system with interventions in upstream industries as well as downstream industries. So we've already gone some way in terms of catalyzing renewable energy. Now, quite a bit of our time is taken up by seeking to develop the green hydrogen ecosystem. And the reason for this is that green hydrogen is a critical driver of transitioning the hard-to-abate sectors, which happen to be at the core of South Africa's industrial structure. But we also don't want to leave it there, but we want to link that with how the inputs that are created by these upstream industries are available to downstream industries so that we can have internationally competitive products at the various levels of that value chain. So you'll see in the diagram that we've listed a few of the priorities that we have in those areas. So maybe expanding a little bit around the green hydrogen example, I think when we say we take an ecosystem approach to development, we really look at not just the financing and investment, but what are the ecosystem gaps and how is there a role that the IDC can play, whether it's a coordination role or supporting the development of policy to ensure that that particular industry has the best chance to be able to succeed. So you'll see here, I won't talk to the various projects that we're looking at, but we're involved with industry leadership where we're supporting the policy development. We are looking at infrastructure investment to ensure that the products that are produced can move from where they're produced to where they are consumed, looking, of course, at the competitiveness of the final product that is used. But we also look at how we can localize various components of production, because this allows us to maximize the development potential of that value chain. And we're doing this in partnerships with industry players, with international funders, some funders from South Africa, and really trying to develop not just green hydrogen for industry, but also for the mobility sector. We then turn a little bit to the pillar on diversification and jobs-rich industrialization. Here we're driving two pillars that we are driving in parallel. The first is around supporting medium and high technology industries. Now, these are industries that have been identified in economics as those that are able to drive sustained growth, that is growth that persists over long periods of time. So these are industries such as machinery and equipment, which are dynamic, offer propensity for learning by doing, but also large opportunities for lateral migration into other things. So you could start producing mining machinery and equipment, but there are aspects of the techniques that you can then leverage to move into agricultural machinery, etc. And in this area, I mean, I think with the targeted approach that we've taken, we've been able to increase funding and disbursements by 29% year on year, and we have bigger plans of what we are doing in the broader area. Then because South Africa has the challenge of such high levels of unemployment, we also are targeting industries that are labor intensive. I think we've had some success with coordinating with the policymakers around the clothing, textiles, footwear, and leather master plan, which is really developing the end-to-end value chain. And the success in this has been great in that retailers are now utilizing more and more products that are manufactured in South Africa. This is, of course, good for reducing emissions arising from transport. Then the third pillar, which is around resilience, I think everyone would be aware now is that we've got various factors that are driving the changes in climate, but one of them being the El Nino and La Nina cycles, where there's increased droughts and increased rainfalls happening in different periods. What has clearly been identified is that when the southern part of the continent is dry, towards the east it usually has more rainfall. So we're seeking to develop regional value chains that allow the sustainability of agricultural value chains, but also at the same time supporting food security. Some of you may be aware of the challenges that Kenya experienced recently, where they had long periods of drought. And here, it's not just about managing the regional value chain aspect of it, but we're also seeing about how to support firms to adopt and adapt technology so that their production or models can be more climate resilient. Then something that I think is exciting to quite a number of people is that the African continent is endowed with quite a number of the critical minerals that are driving green new technologies and industries. And though a lot of people talk about the mineral endowments that exist, we also have a number of capabilities for refining. The IDC has been able to map out some of these capabilities, and we are now pursuing a strategy where we are investing and linking the development of value chains so we could have various critical minerals to battery production or to components or inputs for renewable energy, electric vehicles, and other industries. Then lastly, in terms of how we think about inclusion, so this is not one of the pillars, but one of the supporting bars of our house, is that we think about it in two ways. Number one, because we look at the industrialization aspect in a manner that is inclusive, that is, we are seeking to develop value chains, we're seeking to support industries that are more labor absorbing, that is going to have positive socioeconomic outcomes. But we don't leave it there. We also have specific funds that seek to support socioeconomic outcomes. And I think this is because we recognize that some of the climate change's effects are not distributed fairly. So those that are the losers aren't necessarily the winners. So we need to be able to find ways to support people all the way. Maybe a quick example is the Social and Solidarity Economy Fund that we've set up, which seeks to support implementers, but also beneficiaries. So, I mean, through this fund over the last 4 years, we've supported 46,692 beneficiaries, but in the process also created jobs that are sustained and also supported various businesses that are delivering those jobs. So thank you. I'm going to leave it there for now, and our panel will come through.
Thank you, Pamela. That was interesting. And to actually support this presentation, we're going to have a panel led by Mr. Coetzee, Rian. And one thing that I forgot to mention, whilst we are based in South Africa, the large footprint in South Africa, but we're also interested in the continent, the rest of the continent, and I'm sure you could see that in the presentation on how we look at sustainable industrialization across the continent. So I'm hoping that will come through in the discussion that we're about to have. You know, the differences between what's happening in South Africa, the approach, and how we are approaching the same things in the rest of the continent. Rian, please, and the panel, if you can please come through. Yeah, thanks.
seated.
Anyway, doesn't matter. We'll.
He was dying. It's my charger. I won't forget it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. And I think it's a very important debate for us when we talk about, within COP, where we talk about the just energy transition, that we actually look at industrialization and the manufacturing sector within that space. So we have with us a number of distinguished guests, panelists that will assist us in this debate, and hopefully we can pull you in also afterwards with some questions and answers. So let me just introduce to you who we have on the panel. Right at the end of the panel is at the end of on your right-hand side of the stage is Richard Kozel-Wright. He's the Director of Globalization and Development Strategies at the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. Then we have Wagner de Almeida on my immediate left. He's the Director of Global Manufacturing, Agribusiness and Forestry at the IFC, International Finance Corporation. We have Pierre Herben next to him. He's the Group Head of Carbon and Innovation at Anglo American. And Joanne Bate, who's the IDC's Chief Operations Officer. And Tonderai Mutumbira, he is from the Arch Fund. He's the Technical Director of the Arch Fund. And Neil de Pree, right in the center here, he's the CEO of Malovans, I think one of the case studies that you've seen in our discussion. So let us start off a bit more on a wider view. Richard, if I can start with you. I mean, you've done a lot of work in terms of the challenges of low and middle income countries in terms of sustainable industrialization. What are the issues that these countries need to, what are the proposals that they need to focus on in order to address these challenges?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I mean, Pamela outlined the challenges that you face in South Africa, but they are common to a lot of developing countries, right? I mean, premature deindustrialization has been a feature, sadly, of much of the developing world for the last 2 decades or more. The flip side of that often is a greater reliance on commodities, which was good for a decade at the beginning of this millennium when commodity prices were on the rise and there were a lot of opportunities for growth based on commodity production. That's, for the last, in a lot of commodities at least, has died down to some extent since, after the global financial crisis, and countries have struggled to generate foreign exchange, the kind of foreign exchange they need to be able to manage the sustainable development path that you described and looked at. And job creation has been weak across much of the developing world, and the informal economy has been expanding and on a scale that is very difficult to build the kind of inclusive and sustainable growth path that you have rightly kind of described as the MO of the IDC. So I mean, these are common challenges. It's also the case that we have opportunities, and I think again the presentation identified a lot of opportunities that are coming with. Well, you focused on climate, but also with the digitalization revolution too, and there are real opportunities there. But the opportunities don't merge automatically or spontaneously. It needs a lot of effort from the private sector, from the public sector, if you're going to get a kind of virtuous growth circle by shifting resources out of these traditional activities or declining activities into these new areas. And developing countries have a couple of really big problems there. One, they're massively constrained when it comes to mobilizing domestic resources. Fiscal constraints are very tight in many developing countries. Exchange rate pressures can make it very difficult for countries to mobilize resources. Markets, in many respects, are small, and all the problems that come in a lot of developing countries from the small scale of their markets. These are long-standing challenges that make it difficult for developing countries to mobilize resources. We are critical of the failure of the multilateral system to help developing countries in that respect mobilize financial resources. We don't think they've done their job. In some respects, we've seen some opportunities in recent years from the emergence of new financing institutions, particularly from the developing world. We have a growth of the new development bank, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, a recognition, I think, at long last that public development banks have a significant contribution to make to the mobilization of domestic resources, because for a long time at the multilateral level they were not dismissed, but they were not given their due in a lot of discussions. So, but that resource mobilization constraint remains a problem. And the second one is many developing country policymakers feel that they don't have the kind of space necessary to implement what, after all, and what was clear from the presentation, is industrial policy of some kind or another as a necessary part of the toolkit that policymakers need to be able to affect the kind of transformation and the diversification and upgrading you talked about. That gets us into WTO territory, which I'm happy to talk about if that's the way the direction of the discussion goes. But I think and Africa has become very vocal in the WTO about the lack of policy space that they think they have to make the kind of transition you described. So those constraints, fiscal, domestic resource, policy space, continue to make it difficult for many developing countries, I think, to affect the kind of transition that you've described.
No, I mean, it is quite a tough environment given the fiscal constraints. And I mean, we as the IDC and companies like the IFC would like to fulfill this gap funding almost, the development finance and the critical importance thereof. So Wagner, I don't know if you want to just give us a bit of an overview how the IFC view the situation, and especially approaching these challenges of African countries. What's your approach? We need to lose mic.
Yes, we don't need the mic. Mic'd up. So I am still the old-fashioned. Okay, where is the mic? Okay, so what I can do. Okay, so look, I think we need to, the way that I see the Africa challenge is, Africa is just not one place, okay? There are many different things. I have South Africa with one reality. I have Togo with another one. Kenya another one. When I go to North Africa, there is also different things. I cannot treat the issues in the same way. Also, I see the critic maybe on the multilaterals. I think I agree with you, okay? But when I look for IFC, I think for the last 13 years, we are scaling a lot what we are doing and how we are doing. And Africa is today the first or the second most important portfolio that we have. This is a fact. 13 years ago, we were not in the map. Now, sometimes people say that, oh, I don't have bankable products. I don't have bankable projects. Yes, sometimes that's true, but I think what I understand, what I see is sometimes we say this, but we don't understand the problem. Sometimes we don't have the tools to cope with the changes, with the products that we need, with the challenge that we need. Can I give an example? We, IFC, I have really local hard currency money, dollar money. Will I lend this to a small SME, something which is in dollars? Maybe at the beginning everybody's happy, but when happens devaluations, everybody feels the pain. So also I think we need to find the right instruments, and the local capital market needs to be developed. Without local capital market, without insurance, without pension money, we are limiting what can be done. Also, there is a major issue on regulations, frameworks, legal environments, what are rights. So it's there, but also let's say something. Africa changed a lot for the last few years. There was a massive process of improvement. which is giving people more the chance to develop. What I'm trying to say is, yes, it's a difficult place to do, but it's not an impossible thing to do. And when we talk about manufacturing, we also need to realize that we cannot talk about manufacturing like we used to do before. The main issue in the old manufacturing business is the way that we consume resources, the way that we create emissions, and this is not sustainable. So I think Africa can leapfrog everything else, because Africa, we are discussing here about emissions, but Africa it was not the cause of the emissions that we are facing today. But Africa needs to decarbonize. And I think that's really a big opportunity that we have, is to start a cycle, but to start in a way that not even the developed economies, they are capable to do. It's easier to start from scratch from a green plant in a green field than in a brown field sometimes. There are efficiency issues. The key element for me, which is still missing, is how we finance this. And when we talk about financing, it's not about only the money available. It's at what cost, what kind of structure. Also, when we talk about financial, it's not only about debt, it's about equity, it's about risk management instruments, and that's what we at IFC, we provide. We provide debt, all kinds of debt. We provide risk sharing, we provide guarantees, we provide equity, but unfortunately, we carry a big name, okay, World Bank, but we are still a small bank. We can convene, we can work with the governments, we can bring people together, we can mobilize, but the solution is not for only one entity, it's all of us.
Yep. No, I agree, and this holistic approach toward value chain development that involves various aspects, Jan, and I want to come to you, is so critical, and I know you emphasize it quite often. You say it's not about the just energy transition, but it's actually the just economic transition, which says that it is a holistic approach and an ecosystem approach. And I think both of you said it's a combination of policy, it's a combination of funding, it's a combination of things. Perhaps you can talk a bit on a practical level about ecosystem development and give some examples. Yeah.
Thanks. And I think over and above it being about an economic transition and building ecosystems, it also is about moving away from lowest cost of hydrogen to highest level of value add. And I think that's where the ecosystem approach for the IDC becomes very interesting. So if I can just talk to 3 examples. Within the Vol Triangle, which is a high carbon emissions area that covers the corners of Mpumalanga, Free State, and Gauteng, we have some very heavy industries. We have our petrochemicals industry, we have our steel industry, we have a fertilizer industry, just to mention 3. And all of them see hydrogen as the opportunity to decarbonize operations. The cost of investment for any one of those doesn't make sense for the company on its own. However, as a cluster, you suddenly have a series of off-takers with product that is exported that has the potential to be decarbonized in order to sustain operations and potentially benefit from early green premier in international markets. So that's a critical decarbonization play, critical export protection play, as well as a differentiated export product potential that is enabled because there is an ecosystem of players that make a green hydrogen plant make sense. The second is within the Saldanha area, where there's, the southern tip of Africa is a wonderful marine route. So the opportunity for marine bunkering fuel out of Saldanha is significant. And there's also the opportunity for ammonia as well as DRI and green steel. So there's the potential to build, I think the cost of the hydrogen plant is in the region of is 40 billion rand, which is a third of the IDC's, or maybe a quarter of the IDC's balance sheet. Not something that we could do alone, but and it's not something that any of the companies interested in decarbonizing their operations could do alone. However, as a combination, as an ecosystem of players in the Saldanha area, you have the opportunity to restore jobs that were lost at the Saldanha Steelworks, I think 3 years ago, and to produce a globally value-added product. And what we need to start thinking about when I talk about value is what is the value to the country of accelerating that pathway, restoring those socioeconomic opportunities or creating those socioeconomic opportunities in the Western Cape that allows job creation and economic revenues to be generated. The third, so we've got a strong decarbonisation play, we've got a bit of a decarbonisation and green play, and then there's a brand new play, and our colleagues in the Northern Cape are in my left-hand corner. Boegoebaai Port has been spoken about a lot as a green hydrogen hub. But Boegoebaai, what makes it even more interesting than as a green ammonia, green hydrogen hub, is it unlocks the minerals potential of the Northern Cape. So you again have the opportunity of creating or of mining critical minerals, not just in South Africa, but in that entire central, well, it's not central, but it's southern region of the Northern Cape. So that my geography doesn't sound very good. But there's a band from Zimbabwe, Botswana, Limpopo, through the Northern Cape, which sits on an abundance of critical minerals. And it's not just about, we've spoken earlier, it's not about the extraction of minerals and sending it offshore. And it's not about battery production, because that might be too far down the value chain. But how do we think about the precursor materials and further beneficiation within the Northern Cape that can be evacuated through Boegoebaai Port? And then I would be remiss, sorry, I said 3, but I can't actually close without mentioning the Eastern Cape. And the Eastern Cape, the Hive project, is one of the it's a mega-scale project, and the benefit of that project is that there is all the infrastructure, hospitals, everything else that is needed. So if you look at mega-scale projects, it is almost in a better position than other mega-scale projects where everything has to be built afresh. The other value is that it's right adjacent to our auto industry. So again, there's potential to support the auto industry to ensure that we don't just create cars for the future, but we create green cars for the future. And when we think about building the ecosystems, we need to leverage off the supply chain disruption that COVID presented and really look at how we can localize and green value chains. What I found very interesting is, we talk about the NDCs of different countries, but what no country accounts for is the emissions that happen outside of their shores. So there's enormous emissions that are sitting in the transport of goods and energy around the world. So how do we as a region, because it isn't just a South African play, how do we as a region create these ecosystems with small, diversified value chains that can actually lock into support global markets? Thanks.
Thank you, Jo. And Pierre, we talked about hydrogen. And we know you have, as Anglo, experimented with a truck that you've built. And as part of your transitioning, as part of your plan, please give us some highlights of your strategies in general, but perhaps also in South Africa.
I will focus on South Africa.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically, we are a large mining company like others. And the future will be green or might not be. You've got a cross-border agreement. The society really looks for these low-carbon products. So we launched an ambition to be carbon neutral, not by 2050, but by 2040. So it's not so far away, with a big deal already being done by 2030. In less than 2 years, we built a roadmap. And I'm very happy because we can make it. I'm really confident on that. We have a few question marks, but we've got a solid plan. And the plan is based on several steps. So it's really understanding, cutting the elephant into pieces. And if you look at, if I focus on South Africa, the main emission, the single biggest issue is our scope 2. So it's really the intensity, carbon intensity of energy, basically electricity from ESCOM made from coal. And then you've got a long queue of other important things. Diesel trucks, so hydrogen, because here you've got scale, capacity. You need what you call endurance and autonomy. So that's why we decided to develop that approach to green hydrogen. And then we've got like 200 small things, but they are nevertheless important, like electrifying a smelter. It's not trivial, but we have a plan. So innovation, capital deployment, how can we afford it and do it at scale and in time? And then the other thing is, the initial plan was to look at all the sites, so a dozen of sites in South Africa, Namibia, Botswana. We are also in Zimbabwe. And it's very inefficient to work side by side. So we looked at an ecosystem. So I thought I would be the first to bring the word today, but so a real energy ecosystem where we really tap into the best resources of wind and solar, because this region is blessed by the resources. I always think that if we make it right, it could be the renewable era what Qatar or Middle East has been for the fossil fuel era. So it is blessed by this resource. So if we are smart enough, we are developing a 3 to 5 gigawatt ecosystem. We build it ourselves, so we created a partnership with EDFR, and we collaborate closely with the Energy Council, with ESCOM, with the government, to really understand, to make sure we are a solution to the problem and not an antagonist. And we are going to close our first project of 600 megawatts, hopefully next Wednesday. I'm crossing still the fingers. It's paperwork, but things could go bananas. And we believe we can make it in this decade. Of course, it's grid reinforcement. We see a lot of potential because we've got metals like platinum, like needed for fuel cell. We've got iron ore, and if you get green iron, you get green steel. We are developing already in Brazil, but we look at Sishen, where we are in Northern Cape. Can we make that Northern Cape a power base for using the renewables to reindustrialize or develop, co-localize new green value chain? Because we can connect to green steel, because when you have energy, you have green iron. We have water, by the way, in this area. We've got green steel. You can have green ammonia. We also look at co-locating green agriculture. Yeah, it looks like logic, but low carbon agriculture ecosystem, displacing really carbon intensive approaches. So there is, I think, an all field of opportunities, and then I refer to just energy transition if we make it right. So it's about partnership and ecosystem. So we have already a very strong strategic partnership with EDFR. We are discussing with steel player. We are discussing with other people in the industry, because we believe that with that combination of resources, we can really capture occasion to create this new, what I call industrial low carbon ecosystem. So that's what we are after.
And that can actually, I mean, what is impressive is the large number of value chains that one can actually debottleneck and create. So, so it's not only quite often export play, it is actually a local decarbonization play as well.
Indeed.
And perhaps let me go to Tonderai. I mean, critical minerals have been mentioned a lot here, and there's huge benefit, a lot of interest globally in Africa's mineral resource. You guys, Arch Fund is busy establishing a critical mineral fund. Talk us a bit through your plans there, and of course we always have the interest to understand how can one actually beneficiate more locally and not only export these minerals.
Sure. Yeah, so looking at the need for critical minerals, the way we've looked at it is it's driven by the drive to net zero by 2050 and the urban transition of, I think, 20% of the global population. So the drive to net zero requires a lot of renewable energy. Solar at the moment is just over 1,000 gigawatts installed. It needs to be at 8,000 by 2050. Wind is close to 1,000 gigawatts as well now. It needs to be at 6,000 gigawatts. Electronic vehicles are needed, and if you look at the amount of metal that goes into an electric vehicle, I think we're looking at about 2.5 times what goes into an internal combustion engine vehicle. And then if you look at the urban transition, people moving from rural areas to urban areas are going to consume more goods. They need about 2 to 3 times more minerals than what is consumed by someone in a rural setting. So there's a huge need for critical minerals. I think if you then take it all together, it goes to about 3 or 4 times what is currently being used now for us to be able to get to net zero by 2050. And then that then drives the opportunity for extracting the minerals and beneficiating those minerals. At Arch, we started with a power fund. Our first fund was a power fund, just deploying renewable energies through various, if it's IPPs, mini grids, or small systems on rooftops. But we saw that gap, that there is a need to actually sustainably get the raw materials, and then how do we move from those raw materials through to actual end products that can be used. So I think it's been mentioned, there's a lot of these critical minerals in Africa. Africa has that opportunity to then leapfrog or move through this economic development by not only extracting the minerals, but beneficiating. And for beneficiation, what I think we've identified as key is the need for the energy. You need a lot of energy to beneficiate, and you need to be able to move the minerals. Whether you're importing for additional minerals and then beneficiating, and then you need to export. So the ports are also important. So where we are looking at investments is where we can be able to sustainably, again, I think the theme has been spoken about. ESG is a key theme in the investments we do. We need to be reducing the carbon footprint, not damaging the environment, and looking at or respecting the needs of the local communities. So bringing all of that together, we try and find where those opportunities lie. I mean, we're looking at the Guyana opportunity, where instead of just extracting lithium, we need to look at how we can beneficiate. And we think the driver or the key to that is collaboration. We might not have all the technology, so you collaborate with partners that have the technology. And I think Wagner spoke about it a little bit, but it's some enhanced financing solutions, which then allow us to unlock the money needed to actually get these projects going.
No, excellent. So we've spoken about critical minerals, we spoke about green hydrogen, and Neil, now we're getting to you in the new energy vehicle space. And you are the entrepreneur, the guy on the ground who's trying to bring new technology into commercial phase. I mean, talk to us about your experience and your lessons learned and what the challenges were that you experienced in terms of driving this.
Happy to do that, Rian. Thank you so much. So I think firstly what we build is a light electric delivery vehicle. We're based in Stellenbosch in South Africa. The vehicle's been designed, developed and manufactured locally. Proud to say 100% South African IP in that vehicle. Why is it relevant? Think about this, 30% of all urban traffic would be delivery vehicles in the next 2 years. So last mile delivery is really becoming a global issue. We manufacture vehicles, about approximately 15 vehicles a day at the moment in our facility. We distribute across sub-Saharan Africa. We have vehicles in Western Europe as well. And I'm proud to say we just delivered our first batch into the UAE earlier this week. Yeah, so I think our journey from idea, or a crazy idea, to full industrialization where we're now, we've gone through all of the usual funding cycles. We've made many mistakes, but also some big successes as well. And I think in terms of funding, of course, the first round is always own funding. That is your savings, that's a bond in your house, that's your wife shouting at you. Then friends, fools, family, some mates, your folks, that type of thing. As the process evolves, that's pre-prototype still. Specifically building a hardware product, venture capitalists don't want to touch it. They're risk adverse, they're into software, they don't really do hardware. You're also way too small for most funds, and the bigger funds have minimum ticket sizes. And that's really where the IDC came in. They have a technology venture fund where they were very willing to at least have a conversation with us initially. And the IDC as a fund is also slightly less risk averse than a traditional funder. And that to us was really the enabler. We managed to get some money out of them, and that really pushed us from R&D/design phase into actually building our first batch of 10 vehicles. And for a hardware product, if you build 10 vehicles, that really is, that enabled us to go into a partnership with a fairly large company and put that into production, sign the order, and from an order-based system where you actually have revenue coming in, we managed to qualify for the next phase of IDC funding. And in this case, this was the IDC Automotive Fund. And that was set up many, many years ago for the traditional South African automotive sector, which obviously is changing now significantly, and I think that's a good thing that we're seeing disruption in the automotive sector. We raised quite a bit of money from the IDC in that case, and of course, that's not only money, but that's support, that's board members, that's access to industry resources. And people don't realize, but South Africa has been building vehicles for 85 years. So we definitely have people that can build cars. We have the big international names, and we've had them for many, many years. So along with this IDC funding, human resources came, production engineers, supply chain engineers, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think the natural evolution for us was then obviously growth, and with growth came where we're now, where we just finished our Series A funding round, where we opened the floor to some VCs, and some VCs that participated, and the IDC as well. So now we've really scaled up. Things are going quite well, and I think a last point that I wanted to mention that you asked about is impact. And a business like ours, and any business in Africa, if you're building something, you have real impact. You can see it, you can feel it, you can see it in people's faces. It's not an app where you tell people where to find the local nappies. This is something that we build, where people work. We have people from all 9 of our provinces working at our facility. So we've been very lucky in that way that people want to work at Mellow Vans. They want to learn. Young engineers want to learn. We've seen 2 PhDs spin out of our business, but also young technicians. We have 30% female technicians and engineers working at our facility. And that's incredible to see young girls coming up and doing absolutely everything, from the AI side of things to actually welding chassis. So that impact and the job creation that we have is something that we're super proud of, and I think the whole of South Africa is open for business. That's the way that things are, and we're seeing a lot of ecosystem similarities coming up. And I I think in the EV space, of course, we're seeing charging stations and charging companies and a lot of cool things happening in the EV sector. And again, South Africa is perfectly positioned to really jump on that bandwagon and lead the way into Africa.
Thank you. Richard, you mentioned earlier something that triggered my interest, which is enabler, digitization. And you've done some work around that and how that could potentially unlock some of these opportunities. Tell us a bit about that, because I think it's one of those key enablers that's quite often neglected in development thinking.
It is. I mean, we have a core. I mean, it's an enabler, but it's not a panacea. I think and that's true of all technologies actually when it comes to thinking about the challenges facing developing countries. And you know, I worry a little bit when, these are great examples of things that are happening in terms of moving in the right direction. Ultimately, it's a question of scale when it comes to the climate challenge, because we have to do scale and we have to do it quickly, given what we know about the science. And you know, and when I listen to policymakers in the advanced economies or the people, the great and the good here at the COP, you know, it's all about following the science until you put a price tag on the science. And then they get less inclined about the science and they start to worry about other things. Yeah. And that's a real problem for Africa, because I don't think you can underestimate the size of the debt problem that many Africa. I'm sorry, it's a serious constraint on developing countries generally, and Africa in particular. If you look at the debt servicing of countries across Africa, from Egypt through Kenya, through Ghana, through Angola, Mozambique, and South Africa, this is it's a real binding constraint. And if we don't solve that problem, mobilizing resources for the kind of productive investment that we are talking about at scale, I think will be very, very difficult in the time frame that we're looking at in terms of meeting climate goals. So I really think you can't ignore the macro financial context and the institutional challenges that it poses for developing countries. And that's true of renewables. I mean, let's be honest here. China has introduced more capacity in renewable energy than the entire G7 countries combined. And it's done that through mobilizing public resources on a phenomenal scale in a very short period of time. And it's done it through development banks. This is why, to me, the IDC is important. Developing countries, it's a real tool that has been underexploited everywhere except for China. And that's true of the electrical vehicle. I mean, you're going to have to be competing with the Chinese electrical vehicle producers, and they're already way ahead of the game. And they've done it with access to resources from the public sector, not taxes or subsidies, although they use taxes and subsidies, but because they have these developmental financing institutions that can provide low-cost financing at a scale and quickly that other developing countries have not found the capacity to do. Unless other developing countries do find that capacity, we're going to really struggle, I think, in meeting in scaling up the kinds of initiatives that you've all been talking about, in fact. And that's where we see the real constraint, unfortunately, for many developing countries.
And the cost of capital is quite a driver, although you might have all the good environmental attributes. If you don't have that cost of capital adequate, you are not competitive. I mean, from the IFC side, in terms of bringing down cost of capital, thinking of different blended funding models, can we learn some lessons from you?
Listen, I think cost of capital is a big challenge. If I wanted to price the risk, let's say in Zambia today, it's something that is prohibitive. It's almost impossible to price. Okay. If I want to put the price of the country plus the pricing of the risk of the project. So I'm accumulating more and more to the conversation. Now, I will give an example here. For the green hydrogen, okay? We believe that green hydrogen is a good solution. It's not the silver bullet, okay? There's a lot of vibes in the market, but we don't see. But when I look for the economics of this, I see that what is the pricing of the conventional hydrogen and vis-a-vis to the pricing of the green hydrogen? It's a lot, it's a big gap here. We are talking about at least $7 to $10 difference sometimes. So what we are thinking is, okay, somebody needs to pay for this, okay? Because if I forecast what we expected to the market, then we say that maybe by 2050, things will be more or less competitive, okay? But today is an additional cost, and who is going to pay for this? And then here we started to talk about how can I use the government fiscal space, whoever has. How can I use blended finance? And we are raising a lot of money from donors to try to put and to reduce the cost. But still, if I'm only a commercial investor, it's still too expensive. So we are starting to do a few things, knowing that I cannot fully price my risk. I know that I need to use blended from other sources, and some of this blended maybe is really for cost, is really grant sometimes, okay? So you should not really expect sometimes to be paid. And we need to do this quicker, because if we don't do this right now, the pricing gap will only be increased. And the last function, I think there is also something that we need to discuss. We are starting to see some regions starting to take some measures against the carbon, yes? So what we are starting to see, CBAM in Europe coming. It's something which will push everybody to move ahead, because otherwise certain markets will be closed to the developing economies. And we cannot wait for that. So I think this kind of pressure will push us to do more. But I come back to the point. Also, the local market, they need to be able to finance at some point in time. We need to find ways also, maybe in 5 to 10 years, that pension funds, insurance funds, they will also need to part of the game. Because McKinsey said at least $2 trillion, yes, needs to be developed in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of money, and the governments, they don't have 100%, they don't have the full flexibility that maybe China has.
Yeah.
They don't have the fiscal space.
And we don't have the space to subsidize
or
incentivize. So, I mean, but how will this thing play out, Jan? I mean, you've been chairing the Green Hydrogen Commercialization Panel, and there's clearly a lot of hurdles to overcome. Does this mean we need to walk away from it, or how do you see this playing out?
So I think it requires a different level of thinking. I was saying earlier, it's not about a lowest cost, it's about creation of value. And I'm going to steal an Anglo example. So, you know, the story told on a panel by Anglo was in deciding on their renewable energy program. The renewable energy project didn't meet the corporate hurdle, but they then realized, well, it doesn't need to meet the corporate hurdle because we're not doing this for normal investment purposes. We're doing this for operational decarbonization purposes. So as long as the project is value accretive, we should be looking at doing it. And in doing that, they then had a value accretive project that generated excess renewable energy and made a hydrogen project make sense. So it was different thinking that led to a project that that led to the hydrogen mine vehicle. And you know, they say that, I think it was Einstein who said that we can't solve the problems of today with the mindset that created the problems. So I really do think we need a far more collaborative approach to solving these economic challenges, which is why ecosystem approach. And we need to find different ways of managing risk and thinking about risk. So on an ecosystem basis, the normal bank response will be, oh, we've got interrelated project risks. So there's project on project risk, the risk is too great. But how do we understand the mitigation that comes from the ecosystem opportunities? So I really do think that we need greater collaboration. We need to think differently about returns from a development finance perspective. We need to think about what is the value that is being created through the decisions that we're taking. So if I look back at the 1950s when we created Sasol, we threw 3 engineers at the problem, we threw 90% of our balance sheet at the problem, and fortunately in those days we didn't have IFRS and rating agencies, so it made it significantly easier. But it took a development mindset as opposed to a financial institution mindset. And I think this is something that China's probably done very well. They understand the social and economic benefits of the risk that they're taking, as opposed to striving for financial returns. And I think to me one of the most frightening things, if you look at so we look at stock exchanges, which is public capital, stock exchanges are at an all-time high, but it's all in technology stocks, banks. You don't find a lot of manufacturing companies within that. The real economy, from an investment in stock exchange perspective, has significantly declined in the same period that India and China have significantly grown. So we really do need those investors to think very differently about what it means to invest and grow. Because if we don't get institutional capital to see the value of investing in the real economy, I think we're going to have a challenge. This isn't just a space that can be solved by DFIs. So IDC can think very differently. We can take a 50-year view on building the economy. But as I said earlier, we've got, our balance sheet is a quarter of one of the projects, or one of the projects is a quarter of our balance sheet. We can't do this alone, and we really need institutional investors to think very differently about how we build the future. We need to remove short-termism. The whole stock exchange approach of looking at the next quarter's returns is going to kill companies and kill the economy. So we really do need, I think, collective wisdom to find a 25-year solution for the developing economies. Thanks.
Very interesting. Pia, the example mentioned, which was quite a bold step for you to build this hydrogen truck, how do one upscale that? How do one fast track and try and get it to more of these trucks so that one can ultimately develop a value chain with batteries and fuel cells linked to that?
So I think, it's multi-branch approach, but it's about scale as well.
Yeah.
So that's why I mentioned the ecosystem approach, because if we can combine the generation of hydrogen for truck with other applications, you speak about not anymore a few tens, 100 megawatt, but you're in the gigawatt scale, then I think we can really achieve something different. Because the truck, of course, still needs development. What you have seen, it's a bold statement. We came with one truck. We are on version, 2, 3. It's like every large technology development. It's a long-haul project. But it's all about the infrastructure that comes before. So, and that's where this ecosystem, these partnerships is necessary, because just doing it for yourself will likely not fly.
Yeah.
So that's why we really look at that ecosystem approach and co-location of other application.
Yeah.
So will it fly? Hopefully, yes. We are fighting for that. But it's one of those development that takes guts. And as you said, it's a different model. It's a model where we look at the entire solution, the entire portfolio.
No, thank you for that. I would like to open, I think we have like 10 minutes left, to see if there's any questions from the audience that anybody would like to raise to the panel so that we can have a bit of an interaction. Any interest, any questions? please. Is there a mic, a roaming mic around? Let's see. Please.
One of the things we should think about is really actually think about the cost of equalization of the fuel use. The reason we're all talking about green hydrogen here today is about climate change. The climate change have impact on the economy, have impact on cost impact, direct cost impact on the economy, on the society. Whenever there's weather event, we all jump in spending money, try to rebuild whatever is happening. We don't think that's a cost. But if we really think about the cost, there are numerous studies on the cost of the carbon emission. If we simply apply carbon emission cost, equalize non-carbon-based fuel, are we really still thinking about the huge difference in the cost? Oh no. I think that's something, instead of compare apple and orange of the cost, let's really look at the cost impact of the fuel. And I think that level of data require policymakers and the regulation to help get there. And I think, personally, I think we need to change in the narrative on discussion for cost purely on, the measure of dollar per kilogram without considering the actual usage impact cost. So that we actually not blindsided by continually thinking there is no business case because there is a cost difference on apple and orange. So that's something.
Yeah, something. I mean, you need to look at what
ears.
is the cost of not doing it exactly, and what is the value it creates.
Yeah,
please
just
come in.
one way. I
Yeah.
really agree with what you're saying, okay? But to talk about maybe a carbon tax now, not everybody is open to do that. But there are some industries and there are some places that they are already this kind of instruments. Okay, so there is a trend. So this kind of things is happening maybe slowly to what it should be. If we have something now, I think it will be clear. I know I'm paying the price. I need to pay the price, okay? What is happening is today people are not paying most of the times. But I can give you examples, and I see examples happening in different countries, different industries, this kind of things happening. Also, in the way that I see CBAN is somehow opening this path to some selected products. So I think that what you're saying makes sense, and I think we will start to see much more. And I think that's the right way to do it.
Good.
I think there are segments of different places like carbon trading market in places I guess I'm just saying advocating. We start to really all of us thinking about the impact cost and start pushing much more towards that.
Agreed.
Instead of continue to maybe rationalizing ourselves in certain investment that's not, the cost doesn't justify.
Yeah.
But that may not be the right case. We need to, as a society together, the transparent, uniform counting of this kind of cost is important, not to just apply in certain areas. So collectively, pushing for that. In my view, it's really equalize that so that we actually get beyond this potential cost.
Good. No, thank you. Any more comments, questions?
Can I just say something on CBAM?
Yeah, please do.
Good.
Please come in.
Because, this is becoming controversial. UNCTAD has looked at the nature of CBAM. There's an issue about about having something designed by advanced economies who are responsible for the problem then being there's a moral question to the CBAM issue that I don't think you should ignore. What we found, though, was not only that it will be damaging to developing countries, which it will be, certain types of developing countries where the identified sectors have a large footprint in, but the sad truth is CBAM won't do anything for the climate issue. If you look at the actual impact of CBAM on reducing carbon emissions, it's minuscule. And so there's a virtue signaling by the European countries when using CBAM, which is not going to solve the problem, but it will damage developing countries. And I think when you start designing these kinds of policies without having a multilateral discussion, or at least bringing in a larger number of voices than simply your own voices, then you won't come up with the correct solution. And CBAM is not the correct solution.
Can I voice what you say? I fully agree with you. And we try to, during the conversation, we try to influence this. But they don't want to hear.
They don't want to hear.
They don't want to hear. What is going to do is that the export from South Africa is the one who is going to pay.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. But the production will continue to be there. I think we need to do something much broader and much more inclusive to change the reality. Because the burden will be on few countries. And anyhow, I'm not being politically correct.
Our automotive sectors and the adjustment it has to undergo to comply with those rules is creating actually a bigger risk to our economy than losing coal jobs.
Agreed.
There was a hand here. Good, and then we'll go there.
Thank you. Anthony Dane from Southern Transitions, Global South think tank, and also Just Transition Lab, exploring entrepreneurial opportunities in the just transition space in South Africa. Appreciate the conversation around global value chains and trying to capture more of the value in these new opportunity spaces. And a lot of it from the kind of supply side, how to kind of come together and make South Africa and African actors more competitive in these new opportunity spaces, which we obviously have to have. But I think I'm quite taken, Richard, by some of your quite sobering remarks, to be honest, which I mean I completely agree with. And it makes me sort of one of the questions then, and thinking about CBAM as well, on the sort of the market side, on the demand side. And there have been some conversations about the demand side, but what are the opportunities for us as South Africa or as Africans on the demand side to set up structures so that the premiums that need to be paid for these, or even if it's at this initial stage, for green or sort of attributes to the just transition, that we actually have markets willing to pay and they buy from us. And I mean, I'm seeing this, for example, the First Movers Coalition, which is trying to kind of bring a whole lot of buyers together and say, all right, we're going to buy clean hydrogen or a range of kind of green industrial products. We are having, we've got opportunity there, but we have to compete like others, and we've got the high cost of capital. And I think the sense is we're being sold this opportunity space, but the reality is that all these other players, America's got the IRA, they want to compete. They don't want to give up all of this value. So what can we do to kind of try and say, look, let's create markets that are going to give preferential contracts that our actors can take to the bank. I don't know if it can happen, but and I'm wondering whether critical minerals, last point, is maybe an opportunity space for that, because there is a demand and we do have some leverage, we've got some power, but I'm worried that as Africa, we're going to kind of all, instead of coming together, which is obviously extremely difficult international cooperation, we'll find ourselves in a race to the bottom when we actually have some leveraging power that if we were able to pull together, we could maybe do things differently.
Good. Somebody want to make a comment? Joanne.
Thanks. I think it's a critical point, and that really is what we're trying to achieve through this transitioning to green industrialization, is how do we better plan for impact as opposed to race to zero. So we were in a session this morning with the Coalition of the Willing, looking at how we can coordinate the demand side in order to ensure that we can create those offtake opportunities. And I think it is getting those willing partners together from a supply side. How do we create value in nodes? linking into the off-takers, but critically ensuring that we get our standards and certification right. And I think that's one of the areas we need to be very actively involved in as a country to ensure that the standards aren't imposed on us, but are we actually part of a country and region? We're part of defining what good looks like for the future. I think we need to avoid a compliance mentality, and we really need to think about what is the optimal solution that we can deliver as a country, because I always feel like it's a field of dreams. If we build it, it will be there. We need to invest in those leapfrog market-leading opportunities that allow us to lock into those global premia. On hydrogen, obviously, there's the hydrogen alliances that have been set up for offtake. Some of our projects are quite far advanced in those, but again, the risk that those projects face, particularly, we know the delegated acts and the impact that they have on like a Sasol petrochemicals business, where you can't be selective as to where you allocate the green hydrogen. So I really do think that we need to focus on certification and standards. We need to ensure that the government actively engages host governments in those country-to-country arrangements to ensure that we cement the opportunity base for private sector opportunities to actually be able to run and lock into those. So it really is, public sector needs to engage and enable, private sector needs to run and drive.
Go to last questions, and then we'll close off.
Yes, thank you. Pascal Phelan, Green Hydrogen. I want to make two comments on it. The first one is our attitude, right? I'm 22 years in South Africa. I've raised my children there, so forgive me if I have some thoughts about South Africa. It's Sunday, so I will keep them but I am married, right? So South Africa's glass in this area is half full, right? And we plead poverty, we want money from here, we want money from there, and we're getting all these promises of high-fly numbers, and when you deep down in them, they're hollow, right? What we have is the biggest challenge that the world has seen, not since the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution in 1960, the world GDP was at 1.5 trillion dollars. It's $95 trillion today. So we're not back there with that size. We have a massive change in the entire world of energy and how we're going to operate and how we're going to do. South Africa has the sun, it has the wind. I come from Ireland, I can't do it in Ireland because we have no sun, right? So it's not as if we're without significant advantages, massive advantages, right? And what we've got, what are we going to do? Combine air, water, sun, and wind. That's my ingredients for my hydrogen business. It's almost incredible, right? And in terms of, we intend shipping hydrogen in the second half at the end of 2026 out of Saldanha, and we're going to do it, right?
Okay.
Now, I talk with the buyers and talk with the bankers, and my dilemma is the buyer wants it for 25% less, the banker wants full cut of his margins, and okay, I'm quite confident we'll knock the two together, because eventually people will get to realize is we're not selling and buying, we're creating a future that is livable for our children and grandchildren, right? So I have absolutely no concerns. I need a lot of help, but I have no concerns that them two heads can be knocked together to make it possible. And South Africa can lead. We need green steel for them cars, and more green steel equals more cars. We need green fertilizer for our agriculture. Why can't South Africa be the first country in the world to say all of our agriculture, even if it's only the fruit is from green fertilizer, right? The opportunity is beyond incredible. We know the government doesn't have any money, so we ain't asking the government for any money. We know that the banks will be very, very slow to finance early stages. The international banks will come in
Okay, no, that's good.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
So I think that is actually a good conclusion of our discussion today. I think there's huge opportunities. I think it's quite clear that we need to have an integrated approach. We need to have a long-term view, and we need to be extremely bold. And then lastly, we need to put our heads together and share risk. So with these words, I would have loved to get everybody to conclude, but I think we ran out of time, and I know people need to rush off. Thank you for your time, for joining us. We appreciate your inputs, and I would like you to give our panelists a hand.
Thank you very much. On your desk, you've got this. Please feel free to take this with you. However, on our website, there's a full document which supports this work. We actually explain this in further detail. Please visit our website for the detailed document. And thank you for joining us in this journey. And you'll be hearing more from us on sustainable industrialization, our approach, and how we're linking up all of the issues that have been raised this evening. We've got drinks for you and canapes on the other side. If you still have time, please join us, and good evening.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Yeah.